"Get out of there!" Cale yelled, his voice echoing strangely in the cavernous, decaying cargo bay. The hull groaned somewhere overhead, a long, drawn-out complaint that sent shivers down his spine, though whether from the sound or the cold vacuum seeping in, he wasn't sure. He squeezed further into the narrow vent shaft, the metal biting into his ribs through his environmental suit. "It's collapsing." A faint, high-pitched clicking sound answered him from deeper within the tangled metal and rubble ahead. Not human. He knew that sound. He'd heard it before, whispers and warnings in the black market net, tales of things best left undisturbed in the deep reaches of derelict ships. Lumina, they called them, rarely seen, highly prized and supposedly extinct in this sector. His gut tightened. Finding one here, trapped in this specific, unstable section of the Pride of Valerius, was either the worst luck imaginable or the kind that could make a scavenger rich beyond reckoning. But the thought of leaving whatever was making that sound to be crushed felt wrong. Stupid, probably. He crawled forward, the air thick with the smell of ancient dust, ozone, and something else he couldn't place. A clean, sharp scent, like rain on hot metal, but overlaid with something organic. The clicking intensified, becoming frantic. He reached the end of the shaft and peered down into a small, partially collapsed compartment. Illuminated only by the weak beam from his headlamp and the ghostly, flickering glow originating from the trapped being, the scene was both terrifying and mesmerizing. She was pinned beneath a fallen girder, one limb twisted at an unnatural angle. The glow pulsed from various points across her form, not a constant light, but intricate, shifting patterns of sapphire and emerald, like living constellations projected onto something dark and smooth. They seemed to swirl and intensify with her distress. He couldn't make out much of her physical structure beyond the trapped limb and the general sense of elegant, non-human lines, but the light spoke a language his mind couldn't parse but his gut understood. Pain, fear, desperate urgency. Okay, calm down," he muttered, though she couldn't understand his words. He needed to move that girder. It looked heavy, impossibly heavy. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt, his mind racing. Cut it, try to pry it. The whole structure was groaning louder now. Time was running out. The light on her pulsed wildly, a dizzying kaleidoscope of color that made his head spin for a second. He felt a strange resonance, a low hum that vibrated not just in his ears but deep in his bones. It wasn't just light, it was energy. "All right," he said, more to himself than her, his voice tight. "Let's see." He braced his shoulder against a stable-looking piece of debris, extending the multi-tool's hydraulic jaw. The angle was awkward. He risked collapsing more of the ceiling. The air grew colder. The clicking sounds became sharper, faster, almost like frantic chirping. He could feel her fear, a wave of pure, overwhelming emotion washing over him, amplified by that strange internal hum. It wasn't just empathy, it was like the light itself was broadcasting her terror directly into his consciousness. He flinched, pulling back slightly. This was more than just rescuing a trapped alien, this was something else, something intense and unnerving. But looking at the desperate, shifting patterns of light, he knew he couldn't leave. He took a deep breath, ignoring the trembling in his hands, and focused on the girder. He had to try. The groaning overhead intensified, the sound of stressed metal screaming right above them. Dust rained down. He only had seconds. He jammed the tool against the edge of the girder, activating the hydraulics. It whined, straining against the immense weight. Slowly, agonizingly, the metal beam began to lift just enough. The alien beneath let out a strange, sharp sound, not a scream, but something equally pained. The sapphire lights on her body flared, blindingly bright for a moment, before dimming slightly as she managed to pull her limb free. She slumped, the emerald pattern spreading across her form, a slow, sorrowful ebb. Cale retracted the tool, letting the girder crash back down with a deafening clang that echoed through the ruins. More dust, more debris. The section was coming down faster now. "We gotta move," he yelled, shoving aside loose rubble. She didn't respond, just lay there, the light patterns pulsing weakly. He couldn't tell if she was injured or just exhausted. He reached out, hesitant, towards her uninjured side. The moment his gloved fingers brushed against the cool, smooth surface of her, Skin, scales. A jolt went through him. Not electric, but something deeper, a shockwave of sensory input. The air tasted metallic and sweet. He felt the faint, distant echo of that low hum, but this time it felt different, less frantic, more resonant. The light patterns nearest his hand brightened slightly, shifting into complex, swirling designs he hadn't seen before. They weren't just colors, they were communicating. "Hey," he said softly, trying to convey urgency despite the language barrier. "We need to go, now." He gently tried to urge her to move. She stirred, her head lifting slightly. He saw a cluster of lights near what he assumed was her head brighten. There was something ancient and intelligent in those light patterns. She looked at him, not with human eyes, but with something else. Bioluminescent points within darker sockets that seemed to pierce right through his suit and into him. Another wave washed over him, this time a confusing blend of exhaustion, relief, and wary curiosity. The hum intensified slightly, feeling almost pleasant now, a soft vibration deep inside him. He had to get them out of here before the whole section gave way. He couldn't just leave her. He extended his hand again, this time palm up, a universal gesture of help. He didn't know what he was getting into, but the pull he felt, the strange connection sparked by her light and that internal resonance, was too strong to ignore. He had a feeling his life had just gotten a lot more complicated than scavenging derelict ships for scrap. She hesitated for a moment, the lights near her head pulsing slowly, a complex language he couldn't read but felt the weight of. The groaning overhead turned into a sickening screech as metal tore. This was it. If she didn't move now, they were both finished. He reached out further, his hand closer this time. Her lights flared again, a sudden burst of gold mixed with the sapphire and emerald. Then she reached out a limb, slender, jointed in a way that seemed impossible, ending in delicate bioluminescent fingers, and grasped his gloved hand. The contact sent another, stronger wave of that resonant hum through him. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was intensely distracting, filling his senses with soft vibrations and faint, distant echoes of light and color. He had to fight to stay grounded. Okay, let's go," he muttered, pulling her gently. She moved surprisingly quickly despite her earlier collapse, scrambling out from under the fallen section. He didn't wait. He turned and began crawling back the way he came, pushing the debris aside. He could hear her moving behind him, her rhythmic clicking sound surprisingly close. The air was thick with dust, the light from his lamp barely penetrating the gloom. The resonant hum intensified whenever she was close, a constant, low thrum that seemed to weave through his own heartbeat. It was unnerving, but also oddly calming amidst the chaos of the collapsing ship. He could feel the structure around them groaning, twisting, falling apart. He needed to get her to his skiff, docked a few levels down. It was the only way out. They reached the main corridor just as a section of the ceiling crashed down behind them, sealing off the way they'd come. Cale scrambled to his feet, pulling her upright with him. The feeling of her body beside his was alien and strange, yet the resonant hum intensified, a warm vibration spreading from his hand up his arm. Her light patterns shifted rapidly, streaks of crimson flashing through the sapphire and emerald, a stark expression of alarm. "Yeah, I know," he breathed, scanning the corridor. It was a mess of twisted metal and exposed conduits, but relatively clear. He started moving, keeping a grip on her hand. This way. He didn't look back to see if she followed. He just trusted the tension in her grip and the constant presence of that strange hum beside him. They navigated the ruined corridor, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. She moved with an unnerving grace despite the precarious footing, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing and flowing with her movements, a silent commentary on their desperate flight. He risked a glance at her. Up close, the patterns were even more intricate, swirling vortexes of color that seemed to have depth. And the hum, it was stronger now, a physical sensation that felt like a gentle pressure behind his eyes and a warmth spreading through his chest. It was affecting him in ways he didn't understand. He needed to get her somewhere safe, somewhere he could figure out what she was, what that hum was, and why it felt like his very atoms were vibrating in sync with hers. They reached the access shaft leading down to the docking level. It was a sheer drop, secured only by a frayed maintenance cable. "Okay, this is gonna be tricky," he muttered, clipping his safety harness onto the cable. He looked at her, gesturing to the cable. "Down, go down." He didn't know how else to explain. She looked from him to the cable, her head tilting slightly. The light patterns on her body changed, becoming a complex question mark shape in shimmering gold. He nodded emphatically. "Yes." "Down," he pointed down the shaft. She seemed to understand. Without hesitation, she reached out and secured her own harness, a sleek, integrated piece of tech that seemed to phase into existence from within her bioluminescent structure, onto the cable beside his. He watched, surprised. She was clearly intelligent, capable. He'd assumed she was just a helpless victim, but she moved with a quiet competence that contradicted his initial assessment. The hum intensified as their harnesses clipped onto the same cable, weaving together like threads of light. He felt a strange sense of anticipation, not just for the descent but for whatever came next, for the questions her mere presence raised. He pushed off from the ledge, beginning the long, slow slide down the cable, her alongside him, her light a beacon in the darkness of the shaft. The ship groaned above them, a final, terrible sound as that section finally gave way. They were just in time. The skiff's airlock hissed shut behind them, sealing them inside the small, familiar space. Cale leaned against the bulkhead, his chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly draining away. "Safe," he rasped, pulling off his helmet. The air recyclers hummed, a comforting, mundane sound after the cacophony of the collapsing station. He looked at the alien woman. She stood near the center of the cabin, her bioluminescence dimmer in the confined space, still shifting in soft patterns. The hum was still there, a pervasive, gentle pressure that felt intimate. He could see her more clearly now, or perhaps his mind was starting to adjust to seeing her. There were no obvious eyes or mouth, just those focal points of light within dark recesses, and a series of delicate, almost translucent fins along her sides that shifted subtly. Her skin, or outer layer, was dark, smooth, absorbing the light, making the bioluminescence stand out like intricate circuitry beneath a surface. "All right," he said, running a hand through his sweat-damp hair. "So, you're a Lumina, didn't think you guys were still around." He watched her, trying to gauge her reaction. The light patterns near her head shifted, taking on sharper, more angular shapes overlaid with faint lines of purple. It felt like analysis, calculation, he had no idea. "Look, I'm Cale, I pulled you out of there, you were trapped." He gestured back towards the station with his thumb. "Collapsing, bad place." She remained silent, the clicking sounds occasionally punctuating the hum. The purple lines in her light patterns intensified, then faded, replaced by a slow, undulating wave of deep blue. This felt different. Sadness? Longing? He couldn't be sure, but the emotional resonance was clearer now, filtering through that constant hum. It was like listening to music he couldn't understand but whose mood was undeniable. "You got a name?" he asked, feeling slightly foolish talking to a silent, glowing alien. She took a step towards him. The hum intensified dramatically, pulsing warmly through his body. His vision seemed to swim for a second, colors bleeding at the edges. She raised one of her hands, her fingers extending, and reached towards his face. He instinctively flinched back, heart hammering. This was too fast, too much. The light patterns on her hand shifted rapidly, a dazzling display of intricate symbols and whorls, and he felt a distinct sensation, not of touch on his skin, but of warmth spreading across his cheek and temple. It was like a presence, right next to him, inside him. Then impossibly he heard a sound inside his head. Not a voice, but a tone, a sequence of melodic clicks and hums that resonated directly in his mind. It felt like the hum, but focused, directed, and with it came a meaning, not words but a concept, a name conveyed through pure sensory input. Lyra. He blinked, startled. "Lyra," he repeated aloud, the name strange on his tongue. You put that in my head." He stared at her. The light patterns on her hand rippled gently, confirming his understanding. This was how they communicated, not just through light but through this invasive, resonant hum, this direct transmission of sensation and concept. It was incredible, it was terrifying, it was intensely intimate. Okay, he said slowly, processing this new layer of strangeness. Okay, Lyra, right, Kale, he tapped his chest. You understand me. He wasn't sure if she'd understood his language or just his intent. The light patterns near her head flowed smoothly, a steady stream of soft green and gold. It felt like confirmation, understanding, trust. He was getting better at reading the emotional resonance, even if the complex light language was beyond him. He needed to think. He had a lumina, a being of light and resonant energy in his skiff, a being that could apparently communicate directly into his mind, a being that had been trapped in a collapsing wreck because someone somewhere wanted her or what she had. He glanced around the small cabin. It was cramped, functional, not built for long-term habitation, especially not with a passenger who pulsed with strange energy and communicated telepathically with light. This had just gone from a salvage job to something else entirely, something dangerous and exciting. The hum was still there, a soft background presence now, a quiet conversation happening beneath the surface of his own thoughts. Lyra stood watching him, her light pattern slow and steady, radiating a calm that was infectious. He felt his own tension begin to dissipate, replaced by a weary curiosity and that pervasive, resonant warmth. He had no idea what he was going to do with her, but he knew he couldn't just drop her off at the nearest station. Not yet. "All right, Lyra," he said, running a hand over his stubbled chin. "I guess you're with me now. We need to figure out what to do next. This place isn't safe for long." He started towards the cockpit, needing to get the skiff powered up and off the station. He glanced back. She was following him, her movements silent save for the occasional soft click. As she passed him, the hum intensified again, and a new layer of sensation added itself to the mix, a fleeting impression of vast, empty space, of shimmering light, and a profound sense of loss. It wasn't her emotion this time, it felt like a memory, broadcast accidentally. His breath caught in his throat. Whatever she was protecting, whatever she was running from, it was clearly tied to something immense and important. And now he was part of it. He settled into the pilot's seat, beginning the power-up sequence. The cockpit lights flickered on, casting long shadows. Lyra came to stand beside him, her light patterns reflecting in the viewport, mixing with the distant, cold stars. The hum was stronger right next to her, a constant vibration against his side. It was incredibly distracting, making it hard to focus on his controls. He found himself glancing at her instead, trying to decipher the subtle shifts in her light. He could feel her presence acutely, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, through that invasive hum. It was like sharing the small cockpit with not just another being, but with a living, breathing field of pure sensation and information. "Okay, I need to concentrate," he muttered, flexing his fingers on the controls. "Powering up, don't, hum too loud." He knew that sounded ridiculous, but he didn't know how else to phrase it. The light patterns near her head pulsed with a rapid, almost amused rhythm. It felt like laughter. Could they laugh with light? The thought was disarming. He went through the pre-flight checks, the familiar rhythm grounding him. All the while, the hum was a constant presence, fluctuating slightly with her movements or what he assumed were her thoughts. He still couldn't parse the full language of her light, but the emotional resonance was becoming clearer. He felt her wariness, her curiosity, and something else, something deeper and more complex he couldn't identify. And beneath it all, that persistent, faint sorrow. As the engine spooled up, the skiff vibrating with power, she reached out a hand and placed it gently on the console beside his. The hum intensified again, and this time images flared in his mind. Not memories, but directions. A star chart overlaid with symbols and paths. It wasn't a map he recognized. "What's that?" he asked, staring at the phantom images in his mind. The light patterns on her hand pulsed in response. It was an answer, a request, a destination. "You want to go there?" He traced the path in his mind's eye. It led far off his planned scavenging route, deep into uncharted space towards a cluster of nebulae known only as the Veiled Stars. It was a dangerous region, rumored to be the hiding place of pirates, forgotten alien ruins, and hyperspace anomalies. That's out of the way and risky. The light patterns became insistent, sharp, angular. A faint hint of gold pulsed through the blue and green. Urgency, desperation. He sighed, leaning back in the pilot's chair. He was a scavenger, not a taxi service for glowing aliens with mysterious destinations. His goal was to get back to a station, offload whatever salvage he'd managed to gather, which wasn't much, thanks to the collapse, and find his next job. Taking Lyra to the veiled stars was none of that. It was pure, unadulterated risk. But looking at her, at the silent, pleading language of her light, feeling the pull of that resonant hum, he knew he wasn't going to say no. He couldn't explain it, but leaving her now felt impossible. He was already tangled up in her fate. "All right," he said, meeting her glowing gaze. "Veiled stars it is, but you owe me, Lyra, big time." The light patterns on her body shifted, flowing into soft, curving lines of deep violet and silver. It felt like gratitude, or perhaps a promise he couldn't yet comprehend. The hum softened, settling into a comfortable background presence, a quiet affirmation of their shared path, however unexpected. He gripped the controls, set the course, and eased the skiff away from the crumbling station, leaving behind the ghosts of the pride of Valerius and heading towards the unknown darkness where the stars were veiled. The journey was long and silent, at least in terms of spoken words. Lyra spent most of the time in the small cargo hold, curled up amidst some salvaged netting. Cale stayed in the cockpit, monitoring the long-haul systems, trying to ignore the persistent, gentle hum that emanated from her presence. It was always there, a low vibration in his chest, a soft pressure behind his eyes. Sometimes it fluctuated, and he'd catch a fleeting glimpse of her emotional state, a ripple of calm, a flicker of unease, that constant undercurrent of sorrow. It was like living with a radio constantly tuned to her innermost feelings, broadcasting on a frequency only he could receive. It was exhausting and fascinating. He tried to talk to her, to explain things, to ask questions. He pointed out constellations, described Earth, told her about his life as a scavenger. She didn't speak aloud, but her light patterns would shift in response, occasionally transmitting a concept or feeling directly into his mind. He learned her species was called the Lumina, that their light was their primary form of communication and social bonding. He learned they were hunted. He learned the object she was carrying, secured in a small, light-infused case she kept close, was critically important, tied to her species' survival. He didn't learn what it was, though. Every time he tried to ask, the concept he received was too abstract, too steeped in light and resonance and history he couldn't grasp. He started to notice patterns in the hum. It would change subtly when she was asleep, becoming a soft, rhythmic pulse. It would sharpen when she was alert. When he was close to her, the hum intensified, filling the small skiff, creating an atmosphere that was both alien and strangely comforting. It was a constant reminder of her presence, a physical manifestation of their connection. One cycle into the journey, he woke up to find her standing in the cockpit beside him, watching him sleep. The hum was strong, wrapping around him like a blanket. Her light patterns were muted, soft blues and greens, with slow, swirling motions that felt profoundly peaceful. He felt a distinct, gentle inquiry in his mind, a question wrapped in light and sensation. "Are you well?" He blinked, shaking off the sleep. "Yeah, Lyra, I'm fine, just sleeping." He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders. You sleep okay?" Her light patterns flowed into shapes that felt like nodding, accompanied by a feeling of quiet contentment. He hesitated. He was used to being alone, to the silence of space broken only by the ship systems. Her constant, resonant presence was a disruption, but he was starting to realize it wasn't an unpleasant one. It was company in a way he'd never experienced before. A silent, intimate companionship that bypassed language entirely. He spent more time in the cargo hold with her, despite the cramped conditions. He'd eat his rations, clean his gear, just exist in her presence. She would observe him, her light patterns shifting, occasionally sending a burst of pure curiosity or confusion into his mind when he did something strange, like using a toothbrush. He found himself talking to her more, explaining the mundane details of human life, the things he missed, the things he hated. He told her about the loneliness of scavenging, the constant struggle, the reasons he ended up doing this. He didn't hold back, feeling strangely compelled to share with her, to peel back the layers he kept hidden from everyone else. And she listened, silently, her light a constant, empathetic presence, the hum a soft vibration that seemed to absorb his words, his emotions. One evening, while he was cleaning his blaster, he looked up and found her watching him, her light patterns a deep, contemplative violet. The hum was particularly strong, and he felt a question form in his mind, sharper than before. Your wounds are deep. Why do you not seek healing? He paused, lowering the blaster. He hadn't told her anything specific about that. How did she know? It had to be the hum, the resonance, somehow reading the echoes of past pain in his being. He swallowed, looking away. Some wounds don't heal, Lyra, not really, you just live with them. He didn't elaborate, it was too difficult. He felt a gentle pressure on his arm. She had reached out, her fingers resting lightly on his suit sleeve. The hum intensified, filling him with a profound sense of warmth and sorrow. Not her sorrow this time, but a shared sorrow, an acknowledgement of his pain. Then the light patterns on her arm shifted, swirling into intricate, swirling lines of pure gold and silver. The hum deepened, becoming a vibration that seemed to go right through his suit, through his skin, into his muscles and bones. He felt a physical sensation then, not of touch, but of energy flowing into him, a gentle warmth spreading from where her fingers rested. It wasn't pain, but it was intense, unsettling. His body felt strange, light. He started to tremble. My body's shaking, he whispered, staring at his trembling hand. He looked at her, at the intense, focused light flowing from her fingertips. What did you inject into me? He didn't feel a needle, didn't see any mechanism. It was pure energy, pure resonance. Her light patterns shifted, becoming frantic, a rapid-fire sequence of blues and golds he couldn't decipher. But the feeling he got was clear. Urgency, concern, a desperate need to explain. He stumbled back, hitting the bulkhead. The energy flow stopped abruptly. The intense hum dropped, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache. He felt dizzy, disoriented. What in the star systems had she done? Had she hurt him, or was this her way of trying to heal him? The uncertainty, the violation of his physical space, the sheer alienness of it all, sent a jolt of fear through him. He stared at her, his heart pounding, unsure if she was his savior or a new, unknown threat. Lyra recoiled, her light patterns flashing with what he now recognized as alarm and distress. The high-pitched whine faded, replaced by the familiar hum, but it was muted, hesitant. She retreated a step, her bioluminescence dimming, making her almost blend into the shadows of the cargo hold. The raw fear in his reaction had clearly startled her, perhaps even wounded her in a way he didn't understand. What was that?" he asked, his voice rough. The trembling was subsiding, leaving him feeling drained and vulnerable. He could still feel a residual warmth where she had touched him, a phantom vibration under his skin. He looked at his hand again, flexing his fingers. Everything seemed normal, but he felt different, lighter somehow. She didn't speak, but the light patterns on her body pulsed with a rapid, complex rhythm, accompanied by a flood of sensation into his mind. Images of swirling energy, faint echoes of pain, followed by a feeling of soothing warmth, of mending. It was her explanation, a desperate attempt to convey her intent through the resonance. Healing, the feeling insisted. Attempt to heal the brokenness. He stared at the floor. Brokenness. Was that what she saw in him? The scars beneath the surface, the ones that didn't show. He felt a surge of something complex, anger at the intrusion, confusion at her power, and a strange, reluctant flicker of understanding. You were trying to fix me. The light patterns flowed into a slow, undulating green, accompanied by a sense of confirmation and deep empathy. By doing that, he gestured vaguely towards her. Paced the small cargo hold, trying to process it. Her touch, that invasive energy flow, it wasn't an attack. It was a medical procedure, a form of healing totally alien to him. The thought was staggering, but the way she did it, without warning, without consent, it was still a violation. He felt a knot of tension tighten in his chest. You can't just do that, Lyra, he said, keeping his voice low, trying to inject firmness into it. You can't just touch someone like that, not without asking. Not without explaining. Her light patterns became smaller, tighter, radiating a feeling of shame and confusion. He felt her distress acutely through the hum, like a dull ache in his own chest. It was hard to be angry at her when she was broadcasting such raw, vulnerable emotion. He stopped packing, looking at her. She was still standing there, diminished, her light barely visible. He sighed. This was the problem with aliens. Different rules, different ways of being. Her act, intended as healing, had felt like an assault to him, because it bypassed his human boundaries, his need for consent and understanding. "Look," he said, softening his tone. I appreciate the thought, maybe. I don't know what you did or if it worked, but next time, if there is a next time, you have to ask, or at least try to show me what you're doing before you do it." He felt a flicker of amusement from her, a light pattern shaped like a slightly lopsided circle, accompanied by a soft ripple of the hum. It felt like, how could I ask? We do not speak the same sound language. Right. Communication was still a massive barrier, despite the resonance. He ran a hand over his face. Okay, one step at a time. He needed to establish some ground rules even if she didn't fully grasp them. No more surprise, energy transfers, deal. He held out his hand, not to touch but as a gesture of truce, attempted understanding. Her light patterns shifted, becoming a steady, calm blue. She didn't take his hand, but the feeling of agreement, of a promise made through light and resonance, flowed into his mind. The hum settled back into its familiar, gentle presence. The encounter, while unsettling, had also changed something. It had pushed their relationship beyond simple passenger and pilot, beyond rescuer and rescued. She had seen his brokenness, had tried to mend it in her own way, and he had reacted not just as a human but as himself, exposing his fear, his need for boundaries. It was a moment of intense, if awkward, intimacy. He felt more exposed to her now, more seen. And despite the fear, there was a strange undercurrent of fascination, of wanting to understand her methods, her intentions. He still didn't know if what she did had any effect, but the air between them felt thicker, charged with unspoken things. The journey continued, but the silence was different now, filled with the echoes of attempted healing and the fragile promise of understanding. He sat back in the pilot's chair, the distant hum a constant reminder that he was irrevocably linked to this luminous, mysterious alien, for better or worse. He checked the nav computer. They were approaching the veiled stars. The external danger was about to catch up with the internal complexities. As they approached the edge of the veiled stars nebula, the space outside the viewport became a swirling canvas of ethereal light and shadow. It was beautiful and disorienting. The hum from Lyra, who was now back in the cargo hold but closer to the cockpit entrance, intensified, taking on a shimmering, almost musical quality. He felt her focus shift outwards, towards the nebula. There was a sense of anticipation radiating from her, mixed with a deep sadness. "Getting close, Lyra," he said, his voice low. "This is where you wanted to go, right? To whatever it is you're looking for." He glanced back at the cargo hold entrance. Her light patterns flowed with rapid intensity, a mix of urgent gold and deep, resonant blue. The feeling he received was layered, yes, here, and gone. Gone? His gut twisted. What's gone? He didn't get a clear answer, just that pervasive sadness amplified. He felt a sudden surge of protective instinct. He'd come all this way with her. He didn't want her to find whatever she was seeking, only to be met with further loss. The nebula seemed to press in on them, its swirling gases playing tricks on his eyes. His sensors were acting strangely, picking up faint energy signatures that appeared and vanished. This region was definitely active, and not in a good way. "Anything out there I should know about?" he asked Lyra, trying to keep his voice even. "Threats, people who might not like us being here." Her light patterns sharpened, lines of aggressive red flashing through the blue and gold. The feeling he got was sharp, angular. Hunters. Those who extinguish light. Hunters extinguish light. Slavers, collectors. He'd heard the rumors about specialized groups who targeted rare alien species, especially those with unique biological traits like the lumina's light and resonance. They were probably the ones who had attacked her in the first place, and they likely knew where she was headed. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "Just what I needed." He slowed the skiff. navigating cautiously through the thickest parts of the nebula. Visibility was low, and the energy signatures were making his sensors useless. He had to rely on visual cues and his gut. The hum from Lyra was a constant presence, now laced with anxiety and watchful tension. He could feel her scanning the environment through her resonance, picking up things his technology couldn't. Suddenly, a proximity alert shrieked in the cockpit. A small, fast craft decloaked directly ahead of them, seemingly out of the nebula's gas. It was sleek, dark, and bristled with weapons. He didn't recognize the design, but it screamed hostile. Before he could even react, a disruptor beam lanced out, tearing through the skiff's shields. Alarms blared. "Shields failing," the onboard computer announced calmly, completely contradicting the panic rising in his chest. He slammed the thrusters forward, juking hard to port. Another beam shot past, missing them by inches. Lyra cried out, a sharp, telepathic burst of pure fear that resonated painfully in his mind, making him flinch. Her light patterns went wild, a chaotic storm of red and black. "Hold on," he yelled, wrestling with the controls. The skiff wasn't built for combat. He couldn't outgun them, and he wasn't sure he could outrun them in this dense nebula. He needed cover. He needed a plan. Another disruptor hit, rocking the skiff violently. Lights flickered in the cockpit. The main power indicator dipped into the red. "Lyra," he shouted, glancing back. She was clutching her light-infused case, her entire form radiating terror. "We cannot fight." She broadcast into his mind, the thought layered with despair. "I know," he snapped back, focusing on flying. "Just hang on." He pushed the engines to their limit, diving into a particularly thick cloud of nebula gas. He hoped it would break their pursuer's lock, give him a moment to think. The skiff groaned under the stress. He felt a sudden, intense pressure build in the cabin, originating from Lyra. The hum wasn't just a hum anymore. It was a physical force, vibrating through the very structure of the skiff. Her light patterns flared, impossibly bright, flooding the cargo hold and spilling into the cockpit. It was a controlled explosion of pure energy. "What are you doing?" he yelled, shielding his eyes. The light was blinding, but it wasn't just light. It felt like a pulse spreading outwards from the skiff, through the hull into the nebula itself. He checked the sensors, trying to see if her energy burst had any effect. His remaining systems were still unreliable, but he saw a flicker, a momentary disruption on the sensor display, faint echoes of energy signatures dispersing. It was like she had broadcast something, a pulse of anti-detection, or maybe just overwhelming light that confused their sensors. The pursuing ship didn't fire again immediately. Had she bought them time? He didn't know. The skiff was damaged, power low. He needed to find somewhere to hide, and fast. He spotted something on his unreliable scanner, a faint mass signature deep within the nebula cloud, partially masked by the gas. It could be anything, an asteroid, debris, or maybe. "There," he pointed, more to himself than her. "Looks like something solid. Maybe we can hide there." He adjusted course, pushing the sputtering skiff towards the mass. The hum from Lyra softened but remained potent, her light patterns settling into a wary, watchful state. The hunters were still out there. They hadn't escaped, only gained a temporary reprieve. The fragile bond between them, forged in rescue and shared vulnerability, was now tested by external attack. The stakes had just been raised dramatically. Survival wasn't just about him anymore. It was about protecting the Lumina, protecting the light she carried within her, and the mystery it represented. And he was starting to realize he would do anything to keep her safe. They reached the mass signature, which turned out to be a cluster of large, ancient-looking asteroids fused together, riddled with deep crevasses and shadowed caves. Kale expertly maneuvered the damaged skiff into one of the larger openings, the asteroid's uneven surface providing excellent cover from sensors and visual detection. He cut the engines, letting the skiff drift into the deep shadow. The silence in the cockpit was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic chime of damaged systems. He turned off the internal lights. The only illumination came from the faint, ethereal glow of the nebula outside and Lyra's own bioluminescence in the cargo hold entrance. She emerged, her light patterns muted, radiating a palpable sense of tension and exhaustion. The hum was still present, a low thrum of anxiety. "Power's low," Kale said quietly, checking the diagnostics. "Shields offline, weapons offline, engines. Maybe okay for a short burst, but not much else. We're sitting ducks if they find us." He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "That was something. What did you do back there, with the light?" Her light patterns shifted, a slow, deliberate flow of blue and silver. He felt a concept enter his mind, clearer this time: concealment. A blinding of sight and sensor, brief. "You can do that." He looked at her with renewed awe and caution. Her abilities were far beyond anything he'd imagined. She wasn't just a living light source, she was a being of pure, manipulable energy. The light patterns confirmed his understanding. It draws strength from the core. She gestured towards the case she still held tightly. The core, the object she was protecting, it powered her abilities, made her dangerous to those who hunted her. "Okay," he said, trying to process. "So that thing, it's important, and it makes you a target, and it lets you blast light." It sounded ridiculous when he said it aloud. She took a step towards him, her light patterns flowing into a more complex, question-like shape. The hum intensified, a gentle inquiry. "Are you harmed?" He felt the warmth where she had touched him before, the strange lightness in his body. "No," he said, testing his limbs. "No, I don't think so, just rattled." He looked at her, the soft glow of her presence filling the small cabin. "You were trying to heal me earlier, weren't you, before all this?" Her light patterns flowed into that same slow green of affirmation, radiating a quiet sincerity. I didn't understand," he admitted, the words feeling strange on his tongue. He wasn't used to apologizing, especially not to an alien who had just terrified him. "It felt invasive, like you were putting something in me." Her light patterns shifted, becoming intricate, swirling, radiating a profound sadness. He felt the echo of her thought. "We are not separate bodies. We are fields of resonance. My attempt was to align your discordant frequency, not to invade." "Fields of resonance," he repeated. It clicked into place, some of the mystery of the hum, of the way he felt her emotions, the way she communicated concepts. It wasn't just telepathy, it was a fundamental aspect of her being, of her species. They experienced reality as interconnected fields of energy and vibration. His human body, his closed-off mind, felt discordant to her. His hidden pain, his emotional walls were just noise in his field. He looked at her, seeing her not just as a glowing alien, but as a being who perceived the universe and him in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. The earlier fear began to dissipate, replaced by that pervasive, intense curiosity. "So, that hum," he said softly, "that's your resonance, and I can feel it." Her light patterns became a soft, acknowledging blue. "You are sensitive. The resonance between us is strong." Strong, he felt it. He felt it acutely. That constant, low vibration that had woven itself into the background of his consciousness, that spiked whenever she was close, whenever she felt strong emotion. It was more than just feeling her emotions. It was like their very beings were vibrating on the same frequency, a silent, constant communication happening beneath the level of thought. He reached out slowly, offering his hand again. "Show me," he said. "Show me what you meant about fields of resonance." He wanted to understand, to bridge the gap between their worlds, to feel what she felt, to see what she saw, not just intellectually, but fundamentally. She hesitated for a moment, her light patterns flickering with uncertainty, perhaps remembering his earlier reaction. Then slowly, she reached out her own hand, the bioluminescent fingers glowing softly. This time, when her fingertips brushed his gloved palm, the contact wasn't a shock, but a gradual, gentle wave of warmth that spread up his arm into his chest. The hum intensified, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was smooth, harmonious. And then he saw, not with his eyes but inside his mind, overlaid on his vision of the dimly lit cockpit. He saw lines of shimmering energy radiating from her, complex patterns of light and color extending outwards, interacting with the environment, with the skiff, and most profoundly with him. He saw similar lines radiating from his own body, fainter, more chaotic, punctuated by dark knots and turbulent eddies around his chest and head. The areas, he realized with a jolt, where his deepest emotional wounds resided. He saw the points of contact where their energy fields met, where the resonance was strongest, like two ripples overlapping on the surface of a pond, creating a new, larger pattern. It was breathtakingly beautiful and profoundly revealing. He was seeing their connection, their bond, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible, visible force. The feeling that accompanied the vision was one of deep intimacy, of being seen completely, flaws and all, and being accepted. He felt the sorrow emanating from her, not directed at him, but a fundamental part of her being, a resonant echo of her species' loss, and for the first time he felt like he understood it, not just intellectually but emotionally, vibrating in sync with her pain. And she, he felt, saw his own knots of pain, his own turbulent eddies of past trauma, and radiated not pity but a profound, quiet empathy. In that moment, surrounded by the silence of the asteroid cave and the gentle hum of their intertwined resonance, they were two beings, stripped bare of their defenses, connected by the invisible language of light and energy. The hunters were still out there. The skiff was still damaged, but for a brief, perfect moment, none of it mattered. All that existed was the shared space between their resonating fields. The vision faded slowly, leaving Cale blinking in the dim light of the cockpit. The intensity of the hum lessened, returning to its soft, constant presence, but it felt different now. Familiar, yes, but imbued with the memory of what he had seen, what he had felt. He lowered his hand, his fingers still tingling with a phantom warmth. Lyra stood opposite him, her light patterns a gentle, soft blue, radiating a feeling of calm and quiet understanding. "Wow," Cale breathed, the single word inadequate to express the complexity of what he had just experienced. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the intricate patterns of light not just as decoration, but as a living language, a constant stream of information and emotion. He had seen her fields of resonance, and in doing so, had glimpsed the fundamental nature of her being and his own. Is that what it's like for you all the time?" he asked, seeing everything like that, feeling the resonance. Her light patterns rippled, conveying a sense of affirmation and something else, a quiet acceptance of a world he could only briefly perceive. He sat down on the floor of the cockpit, needing a moment to ground himself. His mind was reeling. He had spent his life trying to keep things out, to build walls, to protect himself from feeling too much, seeing too much. And she, this alien woman of light and resonance, had effortlessly bypassed all his defenses, showing him his own woundedness, and offering a glimpse into a way of being utterly foreign yet strangely compelling. "So," he said after a moment of silence, looking up at her, "you saw the knots, the damage, you knew." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. She nodded, her light patterns flowing with quiet empathy. "The resonance is turbulent, disturbed." He gave a wry smile. "Yeah, well, life's a bit turbulent out here." The smile faded. "Things happen, people get hurt, you just try to keep going." He felt the familiar ache of old memories, the ones that had created those dark knots in his energy field. He looked at Lyra, at the calm, steady light she radiated. You tried to fix it, heal it." Her light patterns shifted into a slow, rhythmic pulse of green and gold, a confirmation, a gentle affirmation of her intention. He felt a warmth bloom in his chest, not just the resonant warmth from her presence, but something originating within him. Gratitude, reluctant maybe, but real. "Thank you," he said softly. "Even if I didn't understand, thank you for trying." Her light patterns flared slightly, radiating a feeling of pleasure, relief. It was hard to tell, but it felt positive, a warm acknowledgement of his words. The hum intensified, wrapping around him, no longer unnerving but comforting. "We should probably figure out what to do next," he said, pushing himself back to his feet. "We can't stay here forever. Those hunters, they'll be looking." He went back to the pilot's chair, checking the status readouts again. Still bad. They needed repairs or a distraction or... Lyra came to stand beside him again. The hum intensified and he felt her focus shift outwards. Through the resonance, he felt her probing the space outside the skiff, not with technology, but with her own senses, her own awareness of the energy fields around them. He felt her perception extending, sweeping across the asteroid cluster, reaching out into the nebula. Suddenly, her light patterns flared, sharp and urgent, radiating a warning. They are close. A moment later, a faint blip appeared on his damaged sensor display just at the edge of the nebula cloud. He hadn't even picked it up yet. Her senses were faster, more acute. They found us. His heart rate spiked. He cursed under his breath. He knew they hadn't bought much time. How? Her light patterns swirled with complex information. They tracked the residual resonance, the imprint of my concealment pulse. She had left a trail, however faint. Damn it! He looked at the status display. No weapons, limited power. They were trapped. He looked at Lyra, at her light radiating grim determination. We must leave, she broadcast into his mind, the feeling sharp with urgency. We can't just run, he argued. They'll catch us. The skiff's too slow, too damaged. Her light patterns flowed into a different shape, a complex, swirling pattern radiating a feeling of sacrifice, strategy. The core has power, it can be used, but not without cost. He looked at the light-infused case she held. The core, the object of her protection, the source of her power. Cost, he asked, feeling a cold dread creep into his gut. A draining, a diminishment of light, perhaps, temporary perhaps. The feeling trailed off, leaving a void of uncertainty, a chilling sense of potential loss. He looked at Lyra. Her lights were steady, resolute. She was offering to use the core's power, whatever the cost to herself, to get them out of this, to protect him after he had protected her. It was a silent, profound offer, made through the language of light and resonance. He felt a lump form in his throat. Lyra, you don't have to do that. Her light patterns flowed into a strong, unwavering wave of blue and gold. I choose this path, for my kind. And for. The hum intensified and he felt a rush of warmth, of deep affection, of resonant connection directed at him. For the sensitive one who saw my light in the darkness. The unexpected intensity of her feeling, broadcast directly into his being, stole his breath. She cared, not just about her mission, but about him, about them. His walls, so carefully constructed over years, crumbled under the force of that pure, resonant emotion. He reached out, this time deliberately, and placed his hand on her arm. Okay, he said, his voice thick. Okay, Lyra, what do we do? Whatever the cost, he was with her. They would face this together. The hum between them deepened, locking their resonant fields together in a silent, powerful affirmation of their bond, forged in fire and light, and now, facing the extinguishing dark together. The hunter's ship reappeared on Kale's sensor display, closer this time. They were systematically sweeping the area, closing in on their hiding spot. Lyra stood beside him, her light patterns intense, radiating a quiet strength he hadn't seen before. The hum between them was a potent force, vibrating not just in the cabin, but seemingly echoing through the rock around them. Ready? Kale asked, gripping the flight controls. His plan was simple, bordering on suicidal. Use the core's power, whatever it did, to create a massive distraction or disruption, then make a mad dash for hyperspace before the hunters could recover. It relied entirely on Lyra and her mysterious artifact. Her light patterns shifted, becoming incredibly complex, radiating a deep focus. She held the light-infused case with both hands, closing her bioluminescent fingers around it. The light from the case intensified dramatically, pulsing in sync with the patterns on her body. The hum in the cabin rose in pitch and intensity, becoming a vibrating roar that felt like his skull was about to crack. Then a blinding flash erupted from Lyra and the case. It wasn't just light. It was a physical wave of energy that slammed into Kale, knocking the air from his lungs. He felt his own energy field, those faint lines he'd seen earlier, flare in response, briefly mirroring the intricate, powerful patterns flowing from Lyra. The connection between them was a torrent, a merging of consciousness and sensation so profound it was painful. He saw visions flash in his mind, not just visions but feelings, concepts, vast stretches of empty space, ancient stars, the deep resonant song of her people, the searing pain of their loss, the desperate hope focused on the object in her hands. It was overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful. On his sensor display, the energy signature from Lyra and the core bloomed into an impossible size, a singularity of pure power that would be visible across the entire sector. It wasn't just a concealment pulse this time. It was a beacon, a challenge, a devastating distraction. He needed to move. Now, he forced himself to focus, to push through the overwhelming sensory input. He slammed the engines forward. The skiff lurched out of the cave into the nebula, engines screaming in protest. He didn't look back at the hunter's ship. He couldn't. All his focus was on setting the hyperspace coordinates, on getting them out of this death trap. The resonance from Lyra remained intense, a constant roar of power and strain. He felt her focus wavering, her energy dimming slightly even as the core's output reached its peak. The cost she had mentioned was real. Her light patterns began to flicker, patches of her form going dark, losing their luminescence. The sight sent a fresh wave of fear through him. "Lyra, stop!" he yelled, but he wasn't sure if she could hear him over the roar of the resonance. He felt her pouring everything into that energy output, maintaining the impossible beacon, buying them time. But she was burning herself out. Hyperspace calculations complete. He pushed the jump button. The skiff shuddered violently, the familiar tearing sensation of entering hyperspace beginning to take hold. As they transitioned, the energy surge from Lyra and the core seemed to spike one last time, a final, desperate burst of power that tore through the fabric of reality. And then silence. The resonant roar vanished, the blinding light extinguished, the humming stopped. Kale slammed the skiff into normal space at a random set of coordinates, his heart pounding, his hands trembling on the controls. He cut the engines. The cabin was plunged into near-total darkness, save for the faint emergency lights. He spun around, looking for Lyra. She was slumped against the bulkhead, the light-infused case fallen from her grasp, and she was dark. Her bioluminescence was gone, replaced by an inert matte surface. The vibrant, living tapestry of color and light that was her being had been extinguished. The pervasive hum, the constant, intimate presence he had grown used to, was utterly silent. "Lyra," he scrambled towards her, his voice thick with panic. He reached her side, fumbling for his emergency medical lamp. He shone it on her. Her form was still there, solid but devoid of any light, any resonance. He gently touched her arm. There was no hum, no vibration, no surge of warmth or sensation. Nothing. It was like touching cool, smooth stone. "Lyra, talk to me. Can you hear me?" He felt for a pulse, for any sign of life, but he didn't know her biology, didn't know what to look for. He was flying blind, terrified. Was this the cost? Had she sacrificed herself to save him, to save them? He saw the case lying nearby. The light within it was also dim, flickering weakly. The power source, whatever it was depleted, and Lyra was dark and silent. He had pulled her from one collapsing wreck only to bring her to another internal one. He sank to his knees beside her, the small cabin feeling vast and empty without her light, without her presence. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. He had lost her. Just when he had finally opened himself up, finally let someone in, she was gone. The ache in his chest, the familiar knot of pain, tightened, sharper than ever before. He had escaped the hunters, but he felt utterly defeated. Kale sat by Lyra's still form for what felt like an eternity. The skiff drifted silently in an unknown corner of space. He checked the life support, functional. Power minimal, but enough to keep them alive for a while. He ran diagnostics, tried to raise a signal, but nothing worked. He was adrift, alone, with the dark, silent body of the alien who had resonated with his very being. He kept touching her arm, hopping for a flicker of light, a hint of that familiar hum. Nothing. She was cold, inert. He looked at the light-infused case. Its internal light was barely visible, a dying ember. The core's power was spent. He felt a profound emptiness, a silence in his mind that was far worse than the silence in the cabin. He was used to loneliness, but he hadn't been alone for days now. Her presence, her resonance had become a part of him, a constant background against which his own thoughts played out. Now that background was gone, leaving a hollow echo. He found himself talking to her, whispering his thoughts, his regrets, his fear into the silent cabin. "I'm sorry, Lyra," he murmured, resting his forehead against her cool arm. "I'm so damn sorry. I should have listened. I should have found another way." The weight of her sacrifice pressed down on him. She had given her light, perhaps her life, to save his, to save the mission she carried. He sat up, looking at her face, or what he assumed was her face, the dark, smooth surface where those glowing focal points had been. He traced the intricate lines that were still faintly visible on her skin, the patterns that had once pulsed with life and emotion. They were just lines now, like faded tattoos. He stayed like that for a long time, lost in grief and self-recrimination. The minimal light in the cabin began to feel oppressive. He needed to do something. He couldn't just sit here and wait to die, or for the hunters to eventually find them. Lyra wouldn't have wanted that. He forced himself to stand up, his limbs stiff and heavy. He went to the cockpit, forcing his mind onto practical matters: power management, life support optimization, finding a signal, any signal. Maybe he could salvage something from the nebula, some piece of tech that could boost their power or communications. It was a long shot, a desperate one, but it was better than doing nothing. He worked methodically, going through the sparse equipment he had. As he worked, he found himself talking to Lyra again, explaining what he was doing, narrating his actions into the silent air. It was a habit forged during their days of resonant connection, a way of sharing his internal world with her. Now it was just talking to a memory. Hours passed. He was tired, hungry, and despairing. He leaned back in the pilot's chair, staring out at the void. He felt utterly alone. He missed her light, her hum, her silent presence that had filled the emptiness of his ship and his life. He missed the feeling of being seen, of being understood on a level that bypassed words. He sighed, a ragged sound in the quiet. He closed his eyes for a moment, wishing he could feel her resonance one last time. He focused on the memory of it, the warmth, the vibration, the overwhelming sense of connection. He focused on the vision she had shown him, of their energy fields intertwining, the bright patterns of her light smoothing the chaotic turbulence of his own. He focused on it with all his might, a desperate, foolish act born of grief and longing. He imagined the hum, felt the phantom warmth, visualized her light. He poured his own desperate energy, his own raw emotion, into the memory of their connection. And then, incredibly, he felt something. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration deep in his chest. It was fleeting, barely there, but it was familiar. The hum. His eyes snapped open. He sat bolt upright, his heart pounding. He felt it again, stronger this time, a fragile thread of resonance pulling at him. He scrambled back to the cargo hold. Lyra lay where he had left her, still dark, still silent. But as he watched, a tiny point of light appeared on her form, near her chest. It was faint, struggling, but it was unmistakably there. A single, hesitant spark of bioluminescence. Then another, and another. Slowly, agonizingly, like stars appearing one by one in the twilight sky, small points of light began to appear across her dark form. They weren't forming complex patterns yet, just simple, pulsing dots of soft blue. And the hum returned, faint, weak but present, a fragile, hesitant vibration that resonated deep in his bones. Lyra wasn't gone, not completely. She was depleted, exhausted, but she was still there. Her light hadn't been extinguished, merely dimmed to the barest whisper. The cost had been immense, but perhaps not absolute. He sank to his knees again, relief washing over him so powerfully it made him dizzy. He reached out his hand, hesitant, towards the nearest point of light. This time, when he touched her, there was a faint return current, a weak echo of that powerful resonance. The single point of light beneath his fingers pulsed slightly in response to his touch. She was alive. She was damaged, perhaps severely, but she was alive, and his desperate attempt to reach her, to remember their connection, had somehow helped, sparked something. He didn't know how or why. Maybe the resonance went both ways, maybe his focused energy had reached her on some level she could still perceive. He sat there for a long time, simply being present with her, his hand resting gently on her form, feeling the faint pulse of her returning light, the fragile thread of her hum. The silence in the cabin was no longer empty. It was filled with cautious hope, with the quiet miracle of her returning light, and with the undeniable, resonant bond that connected them, even in the deepest dark. He didn't know what the future held, didn't know how he would fix the skiff or escape their pursuers, but he knew one thing: he wasn't alone anymore. And he would protect this fragile, returning light with everything he had. He had found something more valuable than any salvage. He had found Lyra. Days blurred into a quiet routine of survival and vigil. Kale rationed their minimal supplies, worked on the skiff, trying to coax more power from damaged conduits, and kept watch for any sign of the hunters. All the while, he stayed close to Lyra. Her light was slowly, painstakingly returning. The single points of light began to connect, forming simple lines and shapes. The hum grew slightly stronger, a steady, gentle vibration. She didn't move, didn't communicate through complex patterns, but her presence was undeniable, a quiet beacon in the skiff. He spent hours talking to her, telling her about his life, about Earth, about the stars. He read from the few datapad novels he kept on board. He sat in the silence with her, just feeling the comfort of her resonant presence slowly returning. He felt a deep, protective tenderness towards her, a fierce determination to see her light fully restored. One cycle, while he was sitting beside her running a diagnostic on the atmospheric processors, he felt a sudden change in the hum. It intensified slightly, becoming more focused. He looked at Lyra. Her head tilted infinitesimally, the light patterns near her face shifting into simple, undulating waves. And then a faint, hesitant thought resonated in his mind. Kale. His breath hitched. "Lyra," he whispered. Her light pulsed brighter than before, radiating a feeling of weariness but also a clear affirmation. "You are here." "Yeah, I'm here," he said, a smile spreading across his face. It wasn't just light and feeling this time, it was her acknowledging him, calling his name. "I've been here, you scared me." Her light patterns flowed into a shape that felt like regret or perhaps apology. The cost was great. "Doesn't matter now," he said, gently touching her arm. "You're coming back, that's all that matters." Over the next few cycles, her recovery continued. The light patterns became more complex, more vibrant, reflecting her returning strength and awareness. She still couldn't move much, but she could communicate with him, slowly at first, then with more fluency. She told him about the core, about its purpose. It wasn't just a power source, but a repository of her species' collective consciousness, their history, their very being. It needed to be protected, carried to a safe haven, a place hidden deep within the veiled stars where their resonance could blend with the nebula's energy, keeping the hunters at bay. She also spoke hesitantly about him, about his turbulent resonance, his hidden pain, and she spoke of the strength she felt radiating from him, the fierce loyalty he had shown. The connection between them, she explained, was unique, amplified by his unusual sensitivity to resonance and the intensity of their shared experience. "You resonate with my light," she conveyed, the thought imbued with wonder and affection. "Your being sings in harmony with mine." He felt it too. The hum was strong now, a constant, warm presence that felt like a second heartbeat, a deeper layer of awareness. When he was near her, his own emotional landscape felt clearer, his anxieties quieter, his sense of purpose sharper. Her light didn't just illuminate the cabin, it illuminated him. They worked together, communicating through light and thought, pooling their knowledge and resources. Lyra, with her deep understanding of energy and resonance, helped him identify subtle energy signatures in the asteroid field, remnants of ancient, abandoned technology. He, with his scavenging skills, managed to extract usable parts, slowly repairing the skiff systems, boosting power, and even rigging a basic, short-range disruptor from salvaged components. The hunters were still out there, a constant, low-level threat felt through Lyra's extended resonance. But they were also hampered by the nebula and the sheer size of the asteroid field. They were searching, but blindly. One cycle, Lyra's light patterns became sharp, urgent. The path is clear. For a short time, the distortion allows passage. Through her, he saw a temporary shift in the nebula's energy, a brief window of opportunity to reach their destination. "Okay," Kale said, his heart pounding. "We go now." He finished the last-minute repairs, strapped himself into the pilot's chair. Lyra, still weak but radiating determination, positioned herself beside him, holding the recharged, softly glowing core case. "Ready?" he asked, looking at her. Her light patterns flowed into a brilliant, powerful wave of gold and silver, a silent expression of readiness and unwavering trust. "Ready. Together." He nodded, gripping the controls. The hum between them intensified, a powerful, unified force. He felt her presence beside him, not just as a body, but as a vast, interconnected field of light and resonance, a partner in every sense of the word. He had come into the veiled stars alone, a broken scavenger. He was leaving them with something infinitely more precious than any salvage, a connection that transcended species, language, and physical form. He pushed the thrusters forward, guiding the skiff out of the asteroid's shadow and into the heart of the nebula, towards the hidden haven of the Lumina, their new beginning shrouded in starlight and shared resonance. The journey had been long, fraught with danger and misunderstanding, but it had led them here, bound together by light, resonance, and an intimacy earned through vulnerability and survival. The future was uncertain, but facing it with Lyra, feeling her light beside him, he knew they could face anything.